I think, Godfrey, it's a reasonable headline, given that we operate in a capital-intensive environment. It's premised on confidence, and very importantly, on economic growth as well. As you know, the letting environment is very challenging on all fronts, and that is as a consequence of a lack of growth in the underlying economy. And also, being in a capital-intensive environment, the cost of capital has crept upwards with interest rates in an upward cycle. And similarly, the property stocks in general pricing at much higher forward yields compared to perhaps a year or so ago.
Yeah, but you don't seem to be feeling any of that pressure, that kind of slow growth that you are alluding to, because I'm looking at your vacancy rate, 4.5%. That compares with 4.6% the previous year. And I'm looking here at your operating cost margin. You're actually getting better, 33.5% versus 34.2%. You're living in another world.
Well, Godfrey, what we do is we create our own magic. So if you have a look at our sectoral spread from a vacancy point of view, there has been about 100 basis point slippage in vacancy on the office as well as on the retail side. But very pleasingly, on the industrial side, we've had a 200 basis points improvement in our vacancy rate. That overall has translated into the vacancy staying at about 4.5% on a group basis. From a margin point of view, we've been working very hard on how we can contain administered prices. By administered prices, I'm talking about electricity, as well as you know, rates and taxes, which are upwards all the time. Always, in terms of tariffs, etc. And just to explain how we've contained our administered prices, which has given rise to the improvement in operating margins, has been through the rollout of solar PV to the extent of 280 million rand we've invested there in our own projects, generating about 22.5 megawatts of power. That's about 5% of our consumption, mainly around our retail properties. And also on the rate side, we've had good success in terms of objecting to valuations which we believe have been excessive.
Right. And so that, did you see that being sustainable, this move towards solar powering your properties going forward?
Well, we will still continue to roll out. We've done most of the retail properties that we can. At this point, we focused on retail because the consumption patterns and the generation kind of work well together. On the retail side, we'll be looking at offices in due course, some more. And even on the industrial side, where we do new builds in particular, we'll be looking to supplement usage of electricity with solar. So it will continue. It's not going to continue at the same pace it did in the past financial year. But we'll certainly continue to do that in our drive to be more efficient, as well as more responsible in terms of our consumption of electricity.
That vacancy rate that we spoke about, the 4.5%, is that overall for the group? Does that include the offshore assets? And when you do a comparative comparison between local and international, how does that look?
Well, this is the thing. This is all local that we're talking about in terms of a 4.5% vacancy rate. If you look offshore, we are virtually at full occupancy in most of our properties offshore. Absolutely.
Including the UK?
The UK is a tough market. The retail is taking strain, but generally they have got long leases in place for most of their tenants, and their occupancy rates are very, very high, much higher than here in South Africa, believe it or not. Yeah.
So that report that I alluded to earlier, one of the things it flags is that during these tough economic times, property companies have resorted to what the writer refers to as shenanigans. And one of the shenanigans he talks about is highly leveraged offshore acquisitions. Is that a practice that you have seen?
Well, I wouldn't call it shenanigans. It's actually a funding methodology that we've adopted. So just to explain to you, Godfrey, overall our loan-to-value ratio on a group basis is 40%. Now, domestically here in South Africa, our loan-to-value ratio sits at about 29%. Which is very, very conservative.
Indeed.
But as a counter to that, we have an aggressive offshore funding strategy where we're almost 100% in some geographies leveraged. And the reason for that is to make maximum usage of the gap in the market where the cost of funding is very low for now. And it gives us a very decent income yield spread as a consequence. So it's not shenanigans. This is a deliberate strategy that we've adopted.
And it is working.
It's working, and we reassess it on an ongoing basis.
Are you worried about the UK?
We are concerned about Brexit, but more importantly, we're worried about the political situation in the UK, because a Corbyn-led government would be far more detrimental to business than Brexit itself would.
Okay. So I wanted to look at your ratio in terms of your offshore listed property. Shows here that you're sitting at, I think, at around 21%, right?
Right.
Yeah, 21% international. Given the current circumstances where we are in South Africa, and also given the current issues around global trade and all these other noises that we keep hearing about, are you comfortable with that ratio?
Very much so, Godfrey. In fact, we would like to grow it to about 25 to 30%. And our focus predominantly from an expansion point of view at this point in time would be in Poland, which is kind of a unique country from a growth prospect point of view, from a sustainability point of view, from a people point of view. And it tells a good story from, just its whole place within the EU and its future within the EU. In fact, I think they're no longer an emerging market now. They're considered to be a developed market, given their growth of late.
Absolutely. So that time frame for that 5 percentage point growth that you're looking at?
Godfrey, it's a function of opportunity.
Okay.
It's a function of availability of capital.
Okay.
And we're going to journey towards that level. It's by no means a race.
Let's talk about the future. You are forecasting that you might be able to pay your shareholders, give your shareholders a yield of about 4 to 5%, and I made a little note here and said below inflation or thereabouts. Is that a function of how just tough that market is, and also the uncertainty leading into our elections next year?
Absolutely. It's a number of factors, I think, there, Godfrey. Principally, it would be the difficult leasing environment in which we are operating at the moment. There's no new users at the moment, and similarly, cost of capital is on the up. So we've gone with a very conservative outlook. It's not yield, I must just correct you, it's growth in distribution per share. Off the current year, our yield at the moment from a forward point of view would be more like 11%.
Okay, all right. Mark Weiner, right?
Yes.
He's leaving, the executive chairman. Why is he leaving?
Okay, so I must just correct you. Mark is not leaving Redefine. He's going to be an executive director.
He's leaving his post as executive chairman.
He's going to vacate the post as executive chairman.
Why?
Well, it's principally due to corporate governance. We want to improve and strengthen our governance, and executive chairmen are frowned upon from a balance of power point of view.
Right.
So for us, it makes a lot of sense to have an independent, non-executive chairman appointed to the board.
Right.
And Mark will continue as an executive director of Redefine for the foreseeable future. We leverage significantly off his 40-odd years of real estate experience.
Does his power come to you?
It's always been with me. We don't operate on that basis. We try to have a unitary decision-making body when it comes to our executive committee. Mark attends those. I chair those meetings.